Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. We are on episode 16, and I've got two very, very, very special guests on with me today. I wanted to save these guys for NFL kickoff. Last year, I had Eli and Mike reach out to me and offer me my first opportunity to guest on a podcast, and I was actually absolutely thrilled. That's where I fell in love with podcasting, shows, live streams, all of that. So I thought it was very fitting to bring you two back for NFL kickoff. We got a game kicking off in just a few hours here, and we're going to highlight some matchups this weekend that I am really, really excited about. Last week, I had Eric Romoff and Jim Coventry on with me, and we talked about Pros with Joes, and today we are just going to focus on these Week 1 matchups. Before we dive into that, though, Eli, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter, where they can find your YouTube channel, and what you guys got going on this season.
Yeah, so I'm Eli. Me and Mike are co-hosts of the All In podcast, which is a sports talk podcast. We talk about NBA and NFL mostly, get into a little fantasy, mostly when Dave's on with us. So you can find me on Twitter at EL1_Coop. If you're watching on the live feed, you can see my tag there. You can also find our podcast at all_in_pod on Twitter. We actually have been on a break for the end of season 2. We are starting season 3. We'll debut on Tuesday on our YouTube channel. So search All In Network on our YouTube channel, or you can find the link on our Twitter. You can find that on YouTube, any platform streaming podcasts, Apple, Spotify, things like that. So Tuesday, be on the lookout for us. We're coming back at you for season 3.
Yes, sir. And, when I come on this show, we do talk fantasy, but you guys talk everything. I mean, we talk cryptocurrency and politics and sports and just a little bit of everything. And it keeps the show fun. It's not just your typical fantasy football or sports show. It's obvious that you guys are good friends, and you can feel that in the show. Mike, I know you're not on Twitter anymore. Probably a wise decision, but why don't you let everyone know? Let everyone know what you've got going on right now as well. I know you'll be joining Eli once the season kicks off. But is there anything else that you're working on?
Yeah, so we do the show together. We also kind of have a little network. We have another show that partners with us, All In Politics. So we've got that going on as well. Allinnetwork.net. We have some block space there where we'll do mock drafts, power rankings. Football season, like Eli said, mostly basketball and football. Football is getting kicked back up now, so we're getting ready to dive back in.
Love it. And I remember when you first invited me on that show, I just went back and rewatched it the other day. I was like, I got to see what I looked like on my first show. And it was a very, very different person than I am now. I remember you gave me a couple talking points, so I had like paragraphs typed up. I was like, all right, they want to talk about this guy, full paragraph. And I'll never forget when you detoured and you're like, all right, so who's the guy that, you should think about benching on Philly? And I was a deer in headlights, eyes wide open. I was like, wait, this isn't on the script. We aren't supposed to talk about this, but, had a blast. And like I said, I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you guys. Right. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I know you guys are both in Pennsylvania. We got a Steelers fan and we got a Philly fan here. So it is only pertinent, or it's very pertinent that we open up with the Pittsburgh and Buffalo game, which is one of the games that I'm most excited about this weekend. I think it's going to be a great game. Mike, I know you're a Steelers fan, so let's start with you. And I want to talk about this matchup specifically. Ben Roethlisberger's arm looked shot last year, and a lot of people are chalking that up as just a recovery year after he had that elbow surgery. How are you feeling about your QB this year?
Dude, well, let me just say, I understand people who saw it last year and they said, Ben, I even said it on our podcast, Ben's got a little bit of the noodle arm, right? It just didn't seem to be working like it was supposed to be working. But I will say this. He went on his first diet ever this offseason. So kudos to him for going on a diet. He did it. Okay, we went on a diet. He looks like he's in really good shape. Preseason, he's actually looked really, really solid. So I think I'm a little optimistic, certainly more optimistic than I was at the end of last season when we're seeing the effects of it. He just cannot pass the ball down the field. But he looks sharp. He's got the weapons, right? He's got Juju, Claypool, Deontay, who I know we're going to talk about. Najee Harris, you add him into the mix. The offensive line is going to be the question mark, losing Pouncey, losing Villanueva. But I think, kind of Matt Canada coming in as the offensive coordinator, he's going to work with that where it's more of a short passing approach, play action. You have Najee Harris, the workhorse now. So I think they're going to be able to do a lot of that stuff that maybe last year they couldn't do without that running back. So I actually like Ben. I'm actually high on Ben this year. I'd be drafting him as probably, he's your backup quarterback, at least to start the year. But I wouldn't be surprised if he had a big year, actually.
Yeah, and something I've called out a lot is kind of the discrepancy when you're looking at fantasy football rankings this year, because everybody has Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, and Deontay Johnson ranked as top 30 receivers, but then everyone's got Ben Roethlisberger in like the back end of the 20s. So it's like, how do we expect all these guys to get supported if somebody's not, somebody's got to throw the ball to them. But Eli, I want to ask you about this a little bit. Mike already alluded to the pass catchers there. Who do you think is going to be the guy to step up this year? We saw some flashes from Chase Claypool last year. Deontay Johnson sure seems to be the security blanket. Juju Smith-Schuster, though, he's still Juju Smith-Schuster. 2 years ago, he was touted as one of the best wide receivers in the league. So who do you think is going to be the guy this year in Pittsburgh?
Well, I think the guy who's going to get the most volume is still Deontay Johnson. I don't see why. As far as significant volume, I should say. They kind of turned Juju Smith-Schuster into Cole Beasley, where he doesn't catch anything beyond 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. So I don't love Juju this year. I avoided him in every single fantasy draft. I actually avoided all of Pittsburgh's receivers because I don't know which one I like the most. Chase obviously has the most upside. And really, if I was drafting a Pittsburgh receiver, it would be him because you'll get better value on him than you would on Deontay Johnson, who was going a little bit higher than him in drafts. And to me, Chase has way more upside because he's bigger, he's stronger. I think he's the best athlete of those receivers. And if Ben is healthy again, like reports have been saying, like Steelers camp has been like testing his velocity on his throws and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, if he's back to where he was before, then absolutely I like Chase Claypool the best because he's their best downfield target, in my opinion. And if he can, break off a couple of big plays, then I think he definitely has the most upside.
Yeah, and I think one of the best ways to hide a bad offensive line is with a mobile quarterback. And you're not getting that with Ben Roethlisberger. So the other way to kind of hide that is to have a really quick release, which Ben Roethlisberger had one of the shortest release times last year. And that's why I don't think that you're seeing these underneath routes so often because Big Ben can't make the big throw. I think it's because he doesn't have time to make the throw. And right. I truly believe that if this team had a strong offensive line, Chase Claypool could be looking at a DK Metcalf type breakout season here. I think that he's got all of the tools to do that. But the problem is when he's getting bum rushed, 2 seconds after taking the ball, he can't really allow the time to develop for Chase Claypool to get downfield. So I want to ask you, Mike, kind of sticking with these receivers, because I feel like that's the hot topic right now in Pittsburgh. Do you think that Chase Claypool will have to change up his style of play a little bit rather than going downfield? Do you expect to see him running more crosses, more slants, and kind of getting under the middle of the ball, similar to the way Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster do?
Well, if you talk about him making this DK Metcalf type transformation, yeah, definitely. That's going to have to be a part of the game plan, especially with Ben and limited offensive line. Like I said, I think it's going to be a little better than we're expecting because once you can get Najee going, if you can get Najee going, the play action opens up. The only way we're getting Big Ben in a 7-step drop is probably play action. They've been talking in the preseason a lot more about taking snaps under center rather than shotgun. And I think a lot of that is to create that play action appeal. Last year they could not go under center. When they would go under center, by the time he took a 5-step drop, he was getting hit if it wasn't play action, if there wasn't something happening. Talking about the wide receivers, I actually Johnson. Right now, I'd go higher on Deontay Johnson. I think he's got potential to be a 100-catch guy. If you look at him last season from week 7 to 17, he's wide receiver 7 in that time frame. He missed some time in the beginning because of a concussion. He had another injury. But when he's out there, he's Ben's favorite target. He gets this comparison probably more than he should just because he plays in Pittsburgh. But he's AB-ish when it comes to route running. He's got amazing feet and really quick hands. So I love Deontay Johnson. I just drafted him last night. Maybe that's why I'm saying all these nice things about him. But I do think that he could be potentially, talking about a guy who has 100 catches. The thing about Claypool and Juju is they're both there. And we saw this last year with Juju. He really struggles to create space when he's the top guy. When the other team's corner, when the other team's defense is focused on him, he just cannot get that separation. And maybe it's a product of not having enough time where it takes him longer to create that separation. But I think Deontay has no trouble creating separation, and he can do it quicker than both of those guys. So I would look for him as a top guy, maybe Claypool second because of the upside, and then I still would have Juju third. He's probably also not going to be in Pittsburgh much longer, so wouldn't be surprised if they work him out of the game plan.
Yeah. Now that's exactly how high of those guys ranked as well. And something I want to point out is, Deontay Johnson missed some games with injury. He had 2 other games that he left in the first quarter. But if you look at the 12 games that he was fully healthy, he was averaging 12.8 targets per game. Over 17 games, 12.8 targets per game comes out to 218 targets. So I don't think that he's going to hit that mark, but it's absolutely unreal how much. And then, you talk about his separation ability, but also his ability to break tackles after the catch. I love Deontay Johnson. I'm one of the most bullish people on him in the industry. I actually have him ranked as my wide receiver 11 overall. I am that confident in drafting him that I'm okay, in that, mid to early third round, I'm pulling the trigger on Deontay Johnson because I think he is that good. The one other weapon on this team I want to talk about, though, and Eli, we'll start with you first, is Najee Harris. Now, a lot of people think that because they spent a first-round pick on Najee Harris, they're suddenly going to become this run-heavy team. I don't think they have the offensive line for that. I don't think they're going to change their identity. This team averaged 600 pass attempts per season when they had Le'Veon Bell. I don't think that they're suddenly going to not be a pass-heavy team. But let's just set the over-under at 300 touches for Najee Harris this year. Do you think that's a benchmark that he can hit, or do you think that's overshooting it a little bit?
I'd take the under on that, simply because I don't think that offensive line is good enough for him to get 300 touches. He's good enough. I'm not sure their offensive line is good enough to where they're going to be able to feed him 300 times a year. I think they'd even like to do that if they, could establish the run and give him 300 touches. I think they'd like to do so. Not sure they're going to be able to do that because I think they are going to have to throw a little bit more than they think. We'll see how much he gets involved in the passing game. He's a good pass catcher, so maybe that can help, screen plays, things like that to help that offensive line out in some way and also get the ball in his hands. But I think 300 is a bit ambitious for him this year, at least until they get some help up front or until Ben leaves and they go through a QB transition. That's probably when you're looking at that kind of volume for him.
Yeah, I mean, 300 touches would be an insane amount, but he's young, and we know that Mike Tomlin, when he finds a guy, he has no problem just leaning on that guy and keeping him on the field. Yeah. So, Mike, I know you got to be excited with this shiny new toy, first-round pick, Najee Harris, first running back off the board. I'm sure you're thrilled. How do you expect to see him get utilized this year? Do you think 300 touches is within his range of outcomes, or do you think that's overshooting it a bit?
Oh, I think that's absolutely within the range of outcomes. In fact, I would probably be expecting 300 touches out of Najee Harris this year. I just think they're going to really lean on him more than we could have predicted, to where he's going to be the workhorse in that offense. I actually liked the draft choice when it happened. A lot of people said don't take a running back in the first round, leave it alone. It's not worth it anymore. But I think where they got is kind of the sweet spot for a running back. I know they have other needs, but I am fine with it. I'm fine with the pick. I love Najee Harris this year as one of the top running backs in the league, and I think he goes over 300 touches.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm banking on as well. Like I said, I think just because of Tomlin's tendencies to really lean on a guy, I could see him easily hitting that benchmark. But let's talk about the Bills in this matchup a little bit. And the only guy I really want to talk about, well, I guess we could talk about 2 guys here, but Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Those guys just took over the NFL last year. Stephon Diggs just absolutely dominated in a position where nobody expected him to. Josh Allen, who had all of these concerns about his accuracy, had a career year and looked like realistically one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, Eli, I'll start with you on this. Do you expect him to kind of play off of that this year, or should we look at some regression heading into the 2021 season?
I think there will be slight regression simply because he was just so good. It's hard to repeat a season like he just had. But I don't think the regression will be like significant enough to where he's not a top 3 quarterback in fantasy. That's still where I would expect him to finish. If anything, I think his rushing might regress a little bit just because I don't know that the Bills want someone they're paying so much money to be running that much. That's the only thing I can really see. And he's a big guy, so he can take more hits, but as we've seen with even like Cam Newton, those do wear on you no matter how big you are. I think there'll be a little regression on the rushing side from a fantasy perspective. But no, I wouldn't put him below like QB3, really QB2. But he absolutely could be the number one quarterback in fantasy again.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. And that's one of the reasons that I'm bullish on Zach Moss this year is because they just gave Josh Allen $260 million. And you don't give a guy $260 million and then expect him to drop his head and try to plow in touchdowns. I think that once they get closer to the goal line, some of those touches are going to start going Zach Moss's way. But Mike, let me ask you the same thing. Are you expecting some regression here, or do you think that Josh Allen is going to be, the top dog in fantasy again this year?
Yeah, I don't know if he's number one undisputed. I would say there's probably, he does Mahomes, Kyler, and Josh Allen would be my three, and I think he's in that three. And then you have guys like Dak who could probably challenge for that if they stay healthy, and Lamar Jackson, who, depending on the rushing and the situation there in Baltimore this year. But I think there's no way he's less than top 3 to 5 for me. So, maybe not one. Maybe he stops running a little bit. It's probably what you want from your franchise quarterback. But he's still, one of the best in the game.
Now, I want to talk about that for just a second because you said that you don't have Lamar Jackson in your top 3. And I don't know if you saw the news right before we went on this show, but J.K. Dobbins ruptured his Achilles a couple weeks ago. Gus Edwards just tore his ACL. Well, I'm sorry, it's not confirmed yet, but Adam Schefter said that fears are that he had a torn ACL. So if they've got no Gus Edwards and if they've got no J.K. Dobbins, they might have to lean on Lamar even heavier. And we got to remember, Lamar hasn't been paid yet. We just talked about how much money Josh Allen got. Lamar Jackson hasn't gotten that check. He's still on a rookie contract. I mean, he might see a career high in rushes this year just because of that depleted backfield. I mean, they've got Le'Veon Bell, they've got Tyson Williams, but I don't know if Le'Veon Bell's got much going on at this point in his career. So people that, do at this point, we're done drafting. The football season kicks off in a few hours. But, I was pretty bullish on Lamar Jackson prior to all of these injuries. And now with Gus and JK both being out, I'm very, very firmly expecting Lamar Jackson to finish as the overall QB1 this year. But let's switch over to the Eagles game. This is one of the games that I'm actually most excited about. The first show that we did together, I remember talking about the Eagles, and you said, what should we do with Carson Wentz? And I said, that's a silly question, man. You always start your studs. Carson Wentz is a stud. Well, that take really blew up in my face because Carson Wentz was anything but a stud last year. But now you guys got Jalen Hurts. I absolutely love this kid. I think that he is Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, I think those are the only guys that are, it's in their range of outcomes to rush for 1,000 yards this year. So let's talk about that first, man. This is a pretty soft secondary that Jalen Hurts gets to go against. Last year he had some problems with turnovers. How are you expecting him to look this week, specifically against Atlanta?
I think if you drafted Jalen Hurts this year, you're going to get a ton of trade offers after week 1, because I think this is as good of a matchup as you could possibly give him. To finally establish himself as QB1. For whatever reason, the Eagles wanted to make him work for it, as if Joe Flacco was ever in consideration for that starting job. So it is what it is. I think this is a good opportunity. He got all the first team reps throughout the entire offseason camp, preseason, everything like that. So he should be ready to go. I think the Falcons, the secondary, they got lit up pretty often last year, will have a lot of problems with an underrated Eagles wide receiver core here in week 1.
I'm glad you said underrated because I feel the same way. Everyone focuses on Devonta Smith, but I think Jalen Reagor is very suited as a wide receiver too. Quez Watkins showed some flashes in the preseason, so I think this is a very underrated wide receiver core. But something I want to ask you about, and it seems like Philly fans have a very, very strong opinion on this. Me not being a Philly fan, looking at it from the outside, I worry a little bit. This is a team that did struggle to win some games last year. Jalen Hurts really had a penchant for turnovers. He had more turnover-worthy plays per snap than any other quarterback in the league. So then they make this trade for Gardner Minshew. And I'm not saying by any means that Gardner Minshew is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. But when I look at their schedule, they've got a Week 14 bye. Let's say they head into that bye sitting at 3-10, 2-11, 4-9. Like if they don't have a good record, if Gardner Minshew starts for 3 games, they get a compensatory 5th-round pick. Do you think that there's any chance that Jalen Hurts gets pulled if this team isn't doing well at the end of the season, or do you think this team is willing to ride or die with Jalen Hurts as the QB all season?
Well, if the season is lost at that point, why not get the 5th-round pick in the deal? because at that point you have probably established that Jalen Hurts isn't your guy, right, going forward. So there, I mean, if there's a conditional pick on the line, yeah, why not? But other than that, I can't see any other reason why Hurts would get benched, because you got 17 games to find out if this guy is your guy, and then you have probably three first round picks depending on how healthy Carson stays in Indy. You probably have 3 first round picks to either package together to move up, or maybe you'll get a high enough pick, like whatever the deal is going to be, to get a quarterback that you like in the draft. So to me, if you're really trying to evaluate this guy, get the biggest sample size possible. And I think by week 14, you'll absolutely know, right, whether Jalen Hurts is the guy. And if he's not, go ahead and make that move to get that 5th round pick. But like Minshew's not the guy either. So it doesn't even, it would be clear that we would be doing that for the pick, and that's it.
For a pick, exactly. Now let me ask you, Mike. I mean, what are you expecting from Jalen Hurts? What are you expecting from Jalen Hurts this year? Do you think that fantasy-wise, I think that this guy is a locked and loaded top 10 QB. I don't think there's any question about it, just because of that floor that he offers you through rushing. But how do you expect him to fare as an NFL quarterback this year, Mike?
Not great. I've seen the comps to a Josh Allen type comeback from he's going to learn how to throw. I don't see it. I don't see it. And you mentioned week 14 getting Minshew in there. I'm actually not sure it gets that.
All right. I think we lost Mike. It looks like you're freezing up for – oh. All right, Eli, I want to throw the next question to you.
Sure.
Once we get Mike back on here, it looks like he's having some technical difficulties. We'll throw it back to him. But Eli, you mentioned that you think that this is an underrated receiving core. So I want to ask you a little bit about Jalen Reagor, because a lot of people have this idea that after a rookie face plants, that's just a death knell for them, that you can't come back from a bad rookie season as a wide receiver. But now with Devonta Smith there, I think it takes some of the pressure off of him. So what are we expecting from Jalen Reagor this season? Could he have a bounce back?
Hey, yeah, he absolutely can. Honestly, I think most of the criticism that he got was because we took him over literally a pick before Justin Jefferson, and he was one of the best wide receivers, not just in fantasy, but in the league last year. So, I think naturally you're kind of like, okay, well, we clearly made a bad pick. But I think if Reagor was a second rounder, it wouldn't have been blown up so much. So, he was a guy who needed a little bit of development anyway. And I think, like you said, Devonta Smith being the go-to guy will free up a lot for him. And I also think if our offensive line stays healthy, we'll have better quarterback play, and we'll be able to get Reagor on some of these deep balls and things like that. Reagor was much better with Hurts in last year than when Wentz was there, simply because Hurts threw the ball deep a little bit more than Wentz was, and I think that benefits Reagor a lot. So I think he does have a little bit of a bounce back here. I'm not super high on him. I'm still kind of see it to believe it. And I don't think there's anything he could do to, make himself look like a better pick than Justin Jefferson. But, I think like when we look back at this season, I'm very confident that we'll be like, you know what, Reagor had a very good second wide receiver type of season for us.
I'm with you. And I think that they complement each other very well. They're very, very different types of wide receivers. But something you mentioned was that Jalen Reagor did better with Jalen Hurts. Well, just about everybody did from a fantasy standpoint. Miles Sanders scored more points. Dallas Goedert scored more points. But Dallas Goedert, he was putting up points without Zach Ertz out there. So I want to ask you, now with Zach Ertz coming back, I mean, everybody was just this entire offseason treating it like Zach Ertz was as good as gone. I mean, I remember the picture of him sitting on the field after that Week 17 game, and everyone, talking about soaking up his last time in the link. But now Zach Ertz is coming back. So do they limit each other's upside, or do you think we can see something similar to what we saw in 2019, where both of these guys finish as top 12 tight ends in fantasy?
I think it's possible. I do. I don't love either of them, though, and their tight ends, both of them I've been avoiding. But I wouldn't be surprised, if both of those guys did end up as top 12 or even top 10 tight ends. Like Zach Ertz is still really good. Like he was really banged up for like the last 2 years, really. But he's still very good. Dallas Goedert is probably one of the more talented tight ends in the league. I just don't think he's really gotten the opportunity, like volume wise, because of how bad the Eagles' offense was last year. I think if our offensive line stays healthy, I think that's the most important thing because, I think with a healthy offensive line, it'll benefit Hurts ultimately. But I think Dallas Goedert. I got Dallas Goedert like in my top 7 or 8, and Ertz is kind of like waiver wire watch list kind of tight end, and if he flashes, then yeah. But I think with the upgrade in our receiving core, that I think I'm a little less bullish on Ertz. I'd still take a late round flyer on Dallas Goedert, but to me, I think he might be like the 3rd, maybe even 4th option with how Quez Watkins was this preseason.
Mm-hmm.
He might be the 4th option in a passing game that won't be one of the best in the league. I think it'll be good, but I don't think it'll be good enough to support 4 fantasy relevant options.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Now, let me ask you about one other guy in the Phillies here. And I don't have my ear to the Philly beat, so I don't know exactly what they're talking about. Last year, we got the talk in the offseason that Miles Sanders was going to be a workhorse. And that wasn't really true. Boston Scott was in there, and now they go out and bring Boston Scott back, and they draft Kenneth Gainwell. So what should we expect from this running back core this year? Is it going to be the Miles Sanders show, or are we going to be looking at a committee with all these guys getting touches?
Definitely a committee led by Sanders, but they like Boston Scott, and I can't blame them. He's a talented running back. They also like Kenneth Gainwell. They really like what he brings to the table in the passing game. So, I think the concerns around Miles Sanders were valid. And I'm not really sure that Miles Sanders is a workhorse back, if we're being complete. Not from a skill set standpoint, he absolutely is, but he has not demonstrated that he can stay healthy enough to handle being a workhorse. So I don't think it's going to be like a committee where Miles Sanders is useless. I think he's still like RB2 range. But Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell definitely limit his upside because they'll take away, pass catching opportunities. Boston Scott will even vulture touchdowns and not even from like the goal line. It'll mostly be from like 20 yards out. He always seems to break off like big runs at some point throughout the game. So he finds a way to vulture touchdowns. So I wasn't very high on Sanders. I was fading him in a lot of drafts, although I love his week 1 matchup. But RB2, low end RB2 range is where I think he's at.
Yeah, I think with all 3 of these running backs, it's kind of, usually they have such different skill sets, but all of these guys can kind of do the same thing. Like they're all really good pass catchers. They're all really good at breaking off that big home run play. So it's going to be interesting to see how the touches are delegated between the 3 of them. But I want to talk about one more player in this matchup, and this guy isn't on the Eagles, but we talked about Ertz and Goddard over in Philadelphia, but I got to talk about Kyle Pitts. I know you're a big college fan. I know Mike's a college fan. So what are we supposed to expect from Kyle Pitts? Because right now people are treating this guy like, his floor is basically to have the best rookie season of all time. So is that what we're expecting here, or is he going to faceplant like every other first-round tight end?
No, I think he will have the best rookie tight end season ever. But that's because I don't really think they'll use him like a tight end. Like I think he's way too talented for that. And I think I've read reports that he's going to be all over the place. Like he's a guy that can line up out wide. You can put him in the slot. You can play him at tight end. There's a bunch of different things you can do with Kyle Pitts. So because of that, I think he has obviously the potential, but I think he will have one of the best tight end rookie seasons ever because he won't actually be used like one. I think people will be surprised. And honestly, outside of Calvin Ridley, who else is there, to compete for
Russell
targets?
Gage.
Right. And Russell Gage is
Zacchaeus,
right. And Russell Gage had the same opportunity last year that he'll have this year. Julio was out a lot and Russell Gage never popped. So, you know what I mean? And I think Kyle Pitts will. I think we'll see them use him in a ton of different ways. He's got a good QB. I think it'll be a very good offense, as it normally is. So I'm excited for Kyle Pitts. I think he's been a little undervalued based on how shallow the tight end position is. As far as talent, I think he's going to be up there as like the fourth guy behind the big three and Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what a lot of people are expecting. And I feel like, if you miss out on those first three, you got to go for the upside, because realistically, no tight end has a floor. Like you can be a tight end 1 and still have a handful of weeks where you're putting up 1 or 2 points. So I totally get that. Now, I definitely want to talk about the Dallas and Tampa Bay game tonight, but what game do you want to talk about here? I got 2 others that are intriguing to me, but I don't know if we're going to have time to cover them all. So do you want to talk about the Jets and Panthers, or do you want to talk about the Seahawks and Colts?
Let's do Seahawks and Colts. I think that one will be a little more fantasy relevant for people.
Let's do it. I love it. And the Seahawks, they open up the season against a very strong Indy defense, and they are on the road. So they got some, chips that are working against them right here. And we saw them just fall apart in the second half of the season last year. So they didn't really make any personnel moves as far as players this year, but they did go out and they brought in Shane Waldron, who is this, passing coordinator savant that they had in Los Angeles, and now they have him as the offensive coordinator in Seattle. So do you expect him to kind of inject this team a little bit with a little bit of life and let Russ cook, or are we going to be looking at this kind of archaic offense that we've seen Seattle running for the last few years?
I think it'll be a mix of both, because I think at their core, they still want to establish the run and play off of that. But the only quarterback, I think, over the last 4 years straight to throw 30-plus touchdowns is Russell Wilson. I don't expect that to change. I expect him to probably hit maybe 35 to 40 this year with the new coordinator. So I'm really high on Russ, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett this year, because I expect them. I don't know about letting Russ cook like they did early in the season, like when he was going ballistic. I don't know if it'll be to that extent, but I think we'll definitely see more of it. Carson tends to get banged up, so I don't know that they'll really want to give him as heavy of a workload as they have, without at least mixing in some Rashad Penny, who also tends to be banged up all the time. But I think I'm really high on Russ, even though he has a pretty tough schedule. I think he's a top 4 quarterback this year in fantasy. I got him right behind Mahomes, Allen, and Kyler. He's 4th for me.
I like that. Yeah, and Russ, this is back-to-back years where he started off looking like an MVP candidate. Like through the first half of 2019, first half of 2020, this dude looked unbelievable, and then it's just the wheels fell off halfway through the season. We've seen this back-to-back years now, and DK Metcalf said it. And I don't know if you saw that interview that he did with Brandon Marshall, but Brandon Marshall asked him, he goes, "What happened? Like you guys were killing it in the first half of the year." And he goes, "Well, teams just kind of figured us out." He goes, "Our game plan was run, play action, deep shot, run, play action, deep shot." And they just started taking that deep shot away from us, and we didn't have anything. So that's a little worrisome to hear, especially from a guy who's, getting comps to Julio Jones and Calvin Johnson. They couldn't take the deep ball away from those guys. So it's kind of concerning that they could take it away from DK. So I heard you say that you're high on Lockett as well. What's the reasoning for that? Because I also am very high on Tyler Lockett. I've got him as a top 15 receiver in fantasy this year.
Yeah, I think we see a little bit, not much, but a little more consistency from Tyler Lockett this year. I think the new coordinator is going to mix things up. Honestly, I think we'll see less of that play action, trying to hit the deep ball all the time. I think we'll see him used a little bit differently, even closer to the line of scrimmage where he can catch and make plays after the catch. I even think we'll see that with DK. I think we'll see a more intermediate passing game. But for Lockett, I think we'll see a lot different usage from him. And he's always a deep ball threat that won't go away. So, I think with them kind of revamping this offense so that they don't hit that wall in the second half of the year after film gets on them, I think they'll be more creative. And I think that benefits Tyler Lockett the most out of him and Metcalf when you're trying to find creative ways to get him the ball.
Yeah, something that blew my mind last year is that over 50% of the routes that DK Metcalf ran were either go routes or slants. Like they weren't asking him to do anything else. It's like, hey, you're fast, just go out there and run past everybody on the field. So, we've seen this guy. Everyone still knocks his 3-cone drill from his combine, but I've seen some videos coming out of camp this year where he looks shifty. He looks like he's moving. He's breaking in his routes a little bit better. So hopefully we can see that elevation from DK Metcalf now going into year 3. But let's talk about Indy a little bit, because Jonathan Taylor was a guy, I remember we talked about him last year, and, he was just a complete dud to start off the season. And then in the back half of the year, he was one of the most dominant backs out there. Now they've got Marlon Mack coming back from an Achilles injury. They've got Nyheim Hines, who's still going to be there. So do you think that Jonathan Taylor gets unleashed and, is just a complete bell cow? Or is this, like almost every other team in the NFL, going to be another committee?
Yeah, I think it's still a committee. But I think we will see more of Jonathan Taylor from the end of last year than from the beginning, because you can't let a talent like that be underutilized too much. But I think they like Nyheim Hines, especially for passing game work. And reports have said Marlon Mack has looked good. I don't know how much of a role Marlon Mack. I think this is a 2-man committee, with Marlon Mack kind of being Jonathan Taylor's handcuff for in between the tackle work, and maybe he steals 3 to 5 carries a game there. But I don't expect him to cut too much into Taylor's workload. But I do. Nyheim Hines will, as far as from passing game. But I think if you have Taylor anywhere from like RB 8 to 12, you're right around the right range, and he has the potential to go up to like RB 1. Really, he's that good. If they truly want to give him that kind of volume.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got all the potential to get there, and we'll just see how the usage works. Now let's talk about what we really, really want to talk about, which is the game that kicks off in just a few hours in Tampa Bay. We got Dallas with, Dak Prescott back and Zeke fully healthy, going up against the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But the big storyline right now isn't really a fantasy relevant player, but it's got a lot of implications in fantasy output this week, and that's Zach Martin. I don't think they've officially declared him out yet, but it sounds like there's almost no chance for him to play. La'el Collins is also dealing with an injury, so you've got a 6-time Pro Bowler in Zach Martin. You've got La'el Collins, who's an absolute stud. Both of those guys might be missing this week. So what does that do for you in regards to Ezekiel Elliott? Because this Tampa Bay defense is no joke.
Yeah, I mean, if you drafted him in the first round, which you did, you're starting him still. You can't afford not to, but you're not feeling good about it. You're not feeling good about it at all. Even if Collins suits up, I wouldn't feel great about that matchup. That Buccaneers front seven is as elite as it gets in the league, I would say. So I didn't feel great about him with Zach Martin in. What I mean? Because that front seven is that good. But you gotta roll him out there, because the worst thing you could do is bench, someone like Zeke Elliott and end up, eating crow the next day. I think the one thing that you can do, though, if you don't have Ezekiel Elliott, is target him after this week, because I think, there's been a lot of concerns about Zeke this year, and in terms of fantasy, a lot of people were fading him. And if the person who maybe reluctantly drafted Zeke is panicking after week 1, that might be the best value you get on him all year, post draft and week 1. So he's a week 1 week 2 trade target for me, because it's like 98% likely that tonight's going to be brutal for him. But I actually like Zeke, because I think that offensive line will be healthy this year, and he'll get back to, where he was before if they stay healthy. But without Zach Martin and even possibly Collins this week, it could get pretty bad.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. And I love where your head's at, that you go out and you make a trade offer for him after this week, because we saw it last year, man. Everybody was hitting that narrative that Zeke is washed. All those touches are catching up to him. And really, he was dealing with 2 injuries last year. He had a hamstring injury. He had a calf injury. And then, with Dak Prescott being out, there was really no reason to keep feeding Zeke. So they just kind of turned to Pollard towards the end of the year. But at the end of the day, they're paying that man a lot of money, and they are not paying him to sit on the bench while Tony Pollard gets the lion's shares of the work. So I'm with you. If there are any signs of a struggle this week, I'm going out and making all the offers I can. But let's talk about Dak too, because, obviously we already talked about the problems with the O-line, and now you've got Dak Prescott, who's not only coming off this gruesome leg injury that we saw last year, but he also tweaked his throwing shoulder in camp. So he has had a very shortened offseason coming back from a surgery. And people are fading him now. And he was like a top 5 quarterback in drafts, and now he's getting ranked as a low-end QB1. So do you have any confidence in him?
I do. I actually think it's an okay matchup for him. The one soft spot in the Bucs defense is their secondary, if you want to call it a soft spot. That's where they can be exploited the most. How much time is he going to have to throw is going to be the main thing, and how injured is that shoulder? The Cowboys seem to say that he's been fine and that they've really just been monitoring it, but I don't think you really know until you take that first hit. You know what I mean? So, which he will. He'll get hit quite often tonight with that Tampa Bay defensive line. So you definitely don't love the matchup. I actually have him in a couple of leagues, and I have Jalen Hurts as my backup in one of them, and I'm still on the fence about whether I'm going to start him over Hurts this week. That's a tough call for me right now, given the matchups. And I think honestly, if I hear Collins is out tonight, I think I'm going to bench him.
Well, you just gave me an awesome opportunity to plug my show from last night on the Football Guys YouTube channel. We had our mailbag show, and what I thought was the best question of the week is what we opened the show with and titled the show. It's, should I start Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott? So Me, Victoria Geary, and Troy King, we had a long discussion about it, and we were split. 2 of us said Jalen Hurts, 1 said Dak Prescott, but it's a good conversation to be had. I mean, that is Jalen Hurts is a cake matchup, and Dak Prescott coming off an injury with injuries to the offensive line against a stout defense. I think you could make the argument there's going to be a lot of garbage time opportunity here, where like maybe they just get blown out and they're down 3 or 4 touchdowns right off the bat, and then Dak just has to throw, which is kind of where he got a lot of his points last year, if we're being honest. We're just he'd go into the third quarter with 12 points, and then he'd finish the game with 32. We've seen this from Dak Prescott quite a bit, and that could be the case again this year. But I want to talk about the wide receivers on both of these teams, because I believe that along with Pittsburgh, these are the 2 best wide receiver cores in the NFL. So Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb right now, there's a lot of talk as to who the wide receiver 1 is going to be on this team. So I want to get your opinion. Do you think that Amari Cooper stays locked and loaded as the team's wide receiver 1, or does CeeDee Lamb supplant him this year?
Until I see otherwise, I think Amari Cooper is the number 1. I thought Amari Cooper was great value for where he was going in the draft. And listen, I love CeeDee Lamb. I love the talent there. But when Dak Prescott was playing, it was the Amari Cooper show still. And CeeDee Lamb was a really good wide receiver too. And that offense was obviously lethal passing wise. But it was Amari Cooper was like top 5 receivers. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But from what I remember, that's where he was until Dak got hurt. And that was really without even scoring a lot of touchdowns. So, the volume was definitely going to Cooper. I think CeeDee Lamb has more touchdown upside because he's kind of the bigger receiver. But I think from a volume standpoint, that stays the same. I think it'll be Amari Cooper as his like go-to guy, CeeDee Lamb as like his 1B type receiver, and a guy that he focuses on like as they get closer to scoring, red zone and in is where we'll see CeeDee Lamb's fantasy value. But yeah, to me, if I'm ranking those Cowboys wideouts, it's still Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and then distantly in third is Gallup for those 3.
Yeah, and that's kind of how the ranking was a few months ago. And then Hard Knocks came out, and Amari Cooper wasn't hurt, so he wasn't getting screen time in Hard Knocks. And then you see CeeDee Lamb making these flashy plays in camp, and then all of a sudden CeeDee Lamb passed up Amari Cooper on the rankings. I think we had it right a couple months ago, and people got a little too excited about Hard Knocks when they started flipping those rankings around. But I also want to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver core, because I think that without a doubt they are the best wide receiver core in the NFL. It's crazy right now that they've got Antonio Brown listed as their wide receiver 3 after he came off of 6 consecutive seasons as a top 3 wide receiver. So on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 saying there's absolutely no chance this happens, 10 saying I would put my mortgage on it, what are the chances that Antonio Brown finishes as the team's wide receiver 1 in fantasy this year?
7, 6, somewhere in that range. Like I'd say 6.5. I'll split the difference. 6.5. Like towards the end of the season, Antonio Brown was getting incredible volume from Tom Brady. Like once he finally got caught up with the offense and things like that, Antonio Brown is kind of Tom Brady's guy. Like he was living with him at one point. He Tom Brady stuck his neck out to get AB in Tampa Bay. Like, he likes Antonio Brown. He got him in New England, but when Antonio Brown was going through his stuff. So a full offseason of those two being able to gel together. I think it's a very good chance. I'm highest on Antonio Brown, I think, of the three, based on where you can get them in the draft. Like, if I was ranking them, he's actually second for me if I'm ranking them behind Mike Evans because of the touchdowns. But as far as where you can get a Buccaneers wide receiver in the draft, I don't think there's better value than Antonio Brown right now.
I'm with you, man. I was doing drafts, and he started to creep up a little bit. Most people have him inside that top 30, top 35 now. But when I was doing drafts back in April and May, which I don't recommend anybody does, because then you end up with, Travis Etienne and Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins, and it's pretty tough to salvage those teams. But you can get crazy discounts. And I was getting Antonio Brown in the 120s, 130s. They were just completely sleeping on this guy. And like you said, he is Tom Brady's favorite target. He came in off the street after a year and a half of no football and immediately was up there with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin from midseason to the end of the season. And then if you look at his playoffs, you include that stretch. Over his last 6 games, he caught 6 touchdowns. Yeah. So he's still got the big play upside. He's still got the red zone ability. And then everything that they've been saying in camp this year is that he is just lighting it up in camp, and Tom Brady likes him more than ever. Let me throw one more at you, and this is just kind of a choose one or the other. It seems like drafters can't choose between Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. They're getting drafted within one round of each other. Do you expect somebody to come out as the bell cow in this team, or is this just going to be another frustrating week-to-week timeshare where Lenny has 100 yards and 2 touchdowns one week, and then Rojo does it the next week? And is it going to be like that again, or does somebody run away with the job?
Frustrating week-to-week timeshare. I honestly, I'm all of the drafters in the world, not knowing which one of these to take. Yeah. So I take neither. It's kind of the approach I've had for the Bucs, or both. I need both or neither. I don't want to, I'm not taking one or the other for those two, unless it's a super deep league. Is the only time I'd take one. I don't know that either one of them really separates themselves, because both of them are better than one another at different things. Like, Ronald Jones is more explosive than Leonard Fournette from a rushing standpoint, but Leonard Fournette, I think, is better in pass protection and as a pass catcher, while also still being good in short yardage as well. So, and also Ronald Jones sometimes struggles with fumbles and things like that. So a lot of things that matter to NFL coaches, more so than fantasy managers, is what Leonard Fournette does better. Whereas Ronald Jones has the big play ability. He's the home run hitter. So I don't think he's going away at any time. And I don't think Leonard Fournette's going away, because I think they need him on the field for real football purposes. So I do see it as a timeshare. If there was one of the two to run away with it at some point, I would actually probably think it's Leonard Fournette, because he, does those real football things that matter to winning better than Ronald Jones does. So I think, if Leonard Fournette could flash as a better big play back, I think that's when we could see him take a stranglehold of that backfield. But unless something like that happens, I think it's a 2-man duo that caps each other's upside.
Just a lot of headaches week in and week out. Yeah. And, you said that Leonard Fournette does the things that coaches like, and I feel like that's going to be the next big metric in fantasy football is the pass blocking and things like that you don't really think about, because we see these guys like Malcolm Brown and Jordan Howard and Leonard Fournette, and we're like, why is this guy getting snaps? And it's because he does the dirty work, and that keeps him on the field. So I'm completely with you. I love that call out there, and I think that not only is Leonard Fournette going a little bit later in drafts, but like you said, he does the things that coaches like, and I think that can earn him some extra playing time. I want to thank you a lot for coming on today. Not sure what happened with Michael. We had some technical difficulties and we lost him there, but I appreciate you for sticking around through the whole show. Before we sign off here, go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and when they can expect season 3 of All In.
Yes, season 3 of the All In podcast. We're going to be recapping week 1. So we record Monday night. That'll be up and available on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, all those podcast platforms for audio. It'll also be available on our YouTube channel as well. Make sure you follow our Twitter page at all_in_pod. That's where we give all the updates about when we're going to go live, when new content posts for not just us, but also All in Politics. Make sure you follow me just because I have great tweets, so, make sure you follow my page as well at EL1_Coop. And I'll have podcast updates and, sports tweets and things like that as well for you guys. So, man, we appreciate you having us on the show. It's good to come on and do your show for a change.
Yeah, man, flip-flopping it. How about it? Like I said, for anyone that didn't catch the beginning of this show, first guest spot that I ever had was on Eli's show. So if you're sick of seeing my face, blame this guy because he's the one that started the fire. So, if there's anyone to blame for what I'm doing nowadays, it's Eli.
Well, it's crazy. We talked about this the other day, and that all just came from like us. We were just trying to book guests with a following at the time. And I think you're at like 1,500 unverified. And had some, I was like, oh, well, we got a fantasy football guy. Like that's a good guest that we can bring on. So I was just shooting my shot. When I sent that message, to see if we can get you on the show, it was honestly, I wasn't even expecting a reply because I had we didn't know each other at all. And then you were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, awesome. We had a great show. And then like every time we check in, you have like twice as many followers as you did previously. So it's like, it's crazy to see your ascension, with your content creation, man. You're my go-to guy for fantasy now, and everything like that. But definitely happy for you, man. It's been well deserved. So keep doing what you're doing, man. Proud of you. Happy to see you flourishing, man.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. It's been almost a year now since we did our first show together, and this is show number 3 we've done, and far from the last. Hopefully we can link up on some in-season stuff as well. But want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. This is episode 16. The whole point of the show is to expand people's reach, help them break into some new audiences, and that's what I hope to provide to my guests every single week. Next week, I'll be joined with Chris Meany and Marco Enriquez as we look into some Week 2 matchups. You can catch us every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern.